Welcome to Between the Cracks, the podcast where we do casual conversations around tea. My name is Dart, and today I'm joined by
Derek from Woodfired Tea and Our Tearoom. Hello, guys.
Today in the warehouse, we have some pretty cool stuff. So you guys have been asking all throughout the year, all at the end of the year, about when are we doing tea? What are we getting for tea? Tea. And really the reason we haven't had tea has been because we're not a tea company, right? We're a teaware company. They are connected, right? The CC Shangguan, right? That Chengyu that says tea and teaware are inextricably connected. But we wanted to make sure the percent was right because there's so many people, there's so many amazing tea companies like One River Tea, for example, or name any number of other ones, right? We have Bitter Leaf, Yuechao Tea, Mei Leaf, Floating Leaf. I mean, you could just go on and on and on of all the amazing tea companies. So we needed to get that percentage down, and we've nailed it in for next year. We're going to carry 4 teas that will be in ball form and 2 different cakes. But that's not what's exciting. What's exciting was the feedback that we got because I wanted to do the art. And we got Adobe Illustrator, and I've messed with Illustrator before, but honestly, my skills they're not there yet. And so Derek and I sat down last week and we said, hey, why don't we put it out to the tea community first? Before we bring in any other, random graphic designer, let's see if there's anyone interested. And there was so much interest that we're actually doing a competition, basically, where we have 9 different artists, I think 9 at this point, who are all doing drafts, and they're going to submit one of the 4 designs, and Derek and I will look at it on Sunday and then decide, which of the artists is going to do all 4 of the designs for our teas next year. So it's pretty cool.
This is my favorite part about doing this in the tea community because we're first reaching out to the people in the community. We do this with our teaware, with our tea cakes, with everything we do. We try and really just support each other. And I think that's really what helps grows the community and creates this kind of solidarity between us all. So I really love the fact that we reached out to the tea community and they reached back.
I didn't know what the result was going to be. Did you see the AI comment on Instagram?
No, I did not. What is it?
I think it was, as Gabby said, hey, why don't you guys, have you heard of using AI art? And obviously we've messed around with that in the past. We've done stuff with it. But really, like Derek said, we want to connect to the community, the tea community, right? Not just a random graphic designer, not AI art. Those are cool, and we'll definitely use them in certain places. And as I get better at graphic design, I'll do some stuff. But just the fact that we had an opportunity to connect to other artists in the tea community is just really, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of work with rural development with One River Tea, looking at kind of these rural areas, impoverished areas, and see what we can do to help them grow their own economy. And one of them is the biggest thing you can do is help create jobs, right? And so the more you can kind of keep everything in a community, the more you can strengthen it, the more you can raise the GDP of an entire village if you're not outsourcing anything. And so that's the idea. We could use AI art. We could find somebody on Fiverr, or we could keep this money in the community. We could pay everyone back for supporting us.
This goes to something that I've kind of struggled with, or people have come to me when they struggle with, when they see the videos we're making, and then they say oh, wow, Dart, the videos are so good, but how do I get started? Or how do I get engaged with social media? And for me, I really didn't like social media 2 years ago.
You did
because
not.
No, I didn't. I hated it. I didn't have anything. I deleted all my
Facebook,
stuff.
Yeah.
To the point where we had issues trying to connect the page because it kept thinking I was a bot.
Now, every time I open Instagram, I see your face.
People tell me that. I missed the social aspect of social media, right? I just saw these really highly produced things and was like, this is so silly. People are just posting on here and they're just, it's all ego and blah, blah, blah. That was what I thought because I wasn't actually being social within social media. And it's funny because I live in Wilmington and I want to get involved more in this community here in Wilmington. But what I realize is there's not a lot of opportunity for connection with a tea community here. I have to basically build it, which is cool. But there are plenty of people already drinking tea. And so when people talk about supporting local, I think that really if you're supporting your local hobby, that's also a form of local, right? It doesn't just have to be in the place you're in. You're still supporting the people that you believe in, the concepts you believe in, the hobby that you love.
This is really cool because it made me think of in-groups and out-groups, right? And so we're always kind of, we have so many different levels and layers of in-groups, and we're always kind of supporting the people in our in-group, right? And so it doesn't have to be local, but it could be some in group of like this community outside of like this specific region. But then the other side of that is kind of getting people from the out group into it. Right. And so that's another thing we're trying to do. We're not only trying to strengthen the community, but we're also trying to invite more people into it. And that's where if you get a reel that goes viral, you can reach another market. You can jump a layer, jump a circle, and then bring people back into this in group of tea. So
all my 99% reels, right? Actually, the one today, 99.9% of people haven't tried this tea. Well, if you're watching us and you drink tea, you've probably had the tea that I'm talking about, but everyone else hasn't. And we get a ton of followers and a ton of engagement on these videos, not by people who are already interested in tea. And people have to understand that I have to produce content for both, right? To grow the community, but also value for people who are already in the community.
Yeah. So that's just a really cool juxtaposition between like, oh yeah, support and strengthen the in group and then draw people from the out group. Yeah. All comes back to what we really, really want to do with the art, with the tea, with the teaware. Yeah, because again, another huge thing is connecting all these American potters. We have this, one really cool thing is we have Chaozhou clay, right? Coming from Chaozhou, bringing it back to America, and we have some American potters work with that. So
we won't spoil too much with that. But Derek, what are we talking about today? What's the main theme?
In front of me right now, I have a lot of different wood-fired Jingdezhen gaiwans, cups, teapots, weird side-handled teapots, black clay. I have some jurenbeis. I have these tiny Chaozhou cups, and they're all made from the same maker. This is Yuechao. Yuechao is the topic for today, and I've been working with him since 2019. He's not from Jingdezhen, but he currently lives in Jingdezhen. And so, Dart, I know you know what Jingdezhen is, but do you want to kind of give an overview of this mecca of Chinese porcelain?
Do you have any Qinghua with you sitting in front of you, Derek?
Only the blue ribbon.
Think of your grandma's china cabinet, right? Like every time you see like a china cabinet and you think of China, right? Fine Chinese china, such a weird concept in and of itself. It's that blue and white porcelain. That all comes from Jingdezhen. In the Qing dynasty, after Emperor Zhu Yuanzhang said, hey, we're only going to drink loose leaf tea, and it wasn't everywhere, but like the emperor pushing it made it the predominant thing. We started to see Yisheng, unglazed pots, really take off, and Jingdezhen as the home who made all of the emperor's wares. So every time an emperor died, Jingdezhen artists made a completely new porcelain set. And so when foreigners came to visit China and they saw this fine porcelain when they were visiting with the emperor or other nobles, they all saw this blue and white porcelain in Jingdezhen. Why does Jingdezhen have porcelain, right? Why do they make porcelain? Because they have some of the purest kaolin mines on the planet, but also it's not just that they're pure, but that they're already usable. Because truly 100% pure kaolin is actually hard to work with. So you want a really high purity, but not completely pure. And all of the clay body in Jingdezhen was perfect for that. In addition to their kilns being able to fire hotter than ever. All right. I love Jingdezhen, guys.
This is a pretty cool thing where it's like, okay, like why did Jingdezhen become famous? You listed a lot of reasons, and one of the main reasons was because of the purity of their kaolin, quality of like the porcelain, the clay, and the materials they have. I was just thinking about a spoiler for later when we talk about Chaozhou and their clay, where it's like, that's why Yixing was very popular, but why Chaozhou was really late to the ceramics game as far as that goes. Yeah. So about that more later. Today, let's stick to Jingdezhen. I've been to Jingdezhen 3 times, and I'm actually going next week. So I'm going to Jingdezhen in just a couple days. 1, 2, 3. I'll be there in 4 days from now. And one of the guys I'm really excited to see is Yuechao. And last time I went to visit Yuechao was in 2022. I was able to visit his studio out in the countryside. This is where he has his bigger wood fire kiln. This is where his parents live and his wife and tends the kids and stuff like that. The first time I went to their studio in the city, which is a really cool place. I'll get into that a little later. But one thing I'm really excited about every time I visit their studios and workspace is just seeing the huge amount of teapots, of gaiwans, of cups that they just have sitting around. Yuechao is a little bit of a perfectionist. And so if you know anything about China, he graduated from the Tsinghua Central Arts Fine Academy, which is the most prestigious fine arts academy in China. And just saying that alone to anybody in China, they're just like, whoa. you know this guy? That alone is enough to stop people in their tracks. But because of that, he has a huge standard that he has to meet as far as quality, as far as artistic expression. And so when I go to his studios, he'll have just a bunch of seconds, right? Dart, what's a second?
A second is basically a type of pottery that the potter themselves doesn't feel like is up to their current potential. Something that for whatever reason, whether it's a flaw in the way when it was fired, or it really could just be that like it doesn't pour the right way, the balance is, I mean, it could be any number of things that the artist personally doesn't think that this piece meets their standard.
Is it cheaper?
A lot of artists don't sell seconds, or if they do, yes, I would say at least 20% off usually, but I mean it's really up to the artist, because again, for a lot of those people, it's an opportunity to get something in someone's hands who might not have enough to get the work at their current standard. So there's not really a fixed point, but yes, it is typically cheaper.
And is it lower quality, would you say?
No, I think by and large, potters are always trying to get better, right? And regardless of if their perception of a piece they made this year isn't up to their standard, I guarantee it's still better than their pieces from last year. So this year's second is probably better than last year's primary, right? Last year's first.
That's exactly what I was trying to get at. Is Yuechao has so many pieces, so many seconds at his studio that I kind of feel bad about asking, because every time I ask him like, oh, like, are you selling this piece? He's like, no, you can just have it though. And I'm like, but hang on. Like, why aren't you selling this? He's like, well, if you feel inside, you feel a little bit of ash stuck to the bottom. And so it has this couple bumps. And I'm like, and so you can't sell it at all. He's like, yeah, you just have it. And I'm like, well, what about this piece? And he's like, yeah, if you want that one, you can have it too. Hang on. My goal here is not just to take all of your pieces. I want to understand your method here. When he's not there, his wife has a bunch of like teaware, and I ask her about it. And she also does ceramics. She didn't graduate from Tsinghua. She does ceramics, and she'll look at the piece and I'll be like, what's wrong with this piece? And she'll look at it for like a full minute and be like, I think maybe it's because of this crack here in the glaze. But she's not sure. She's like, I'll have to wait for Yuechao. So working with this guy, his standards are just so super high, but his quality it's very, very clean.
The thing you got to understand about firing in a wood kiln is it's extremely volatile. And if it wasn't volatile, we wouldn't get the marks and the beautiful coloration on the sides of these pieces. All of this action on the side here is from the volatility in the kiln. Porcelain is oftentimes, especially in Jingdezhen, very thin. So when you're taking very thin, fine porcelain and putting it in a very volatile environment, it is bound to have these flaws. Like it's not even possible to make them without them. So the fact that Yuechao is so specific in these little things is, I mean, really just a testament to his skill and character, like as an artist.
As Dart mentioned, like the action you get on the side, this is called the huowen, I believe in the Chinese, the flame pattern. And so this is when the actual flame hits the piece really, really harsh, and it creates this kind of rough edge. You can feel the roughness to it. Where the other stuff is vitrified, it's nice and soft and glassy, but then you get these really rough patches. One way to tell a piece is wood-fired or not is, does it have this rough edge to it, or is it totally vitrified? Because a piece like Liu, who does really incredible glazes, it's totally vitrified. Even though it might look wood-fired, it doesn't have that rough edge to it. Sometimes with Yuechao pieces, I look at it and it's so pure, so clean. I'm like, is this wood fired? And it's actually, yes, it is wood fired. It's just very, very highly controlled. Another thing that's really fun about working with the same artist for many years is you can see their trajectory, their changes in their style. So this is the piece I bought in 2019. And as you can see, it's very, very simple, very, very pure white, a little bit of blue here. Inside is just totally wild. Style has changed. Eventually, he started making pieces that are a little more rough on the outside with more simple inside. And so here's a dark blue piece that has just a lot of crazy action on the outside, while the inside is much more simple. Well, still here, you have some nice green on the inside. He also started working with different types of clay, some clays that are really, really groggy, really thick, not very clean porcelain, and I really like this style. It's the juxtaposition between a really fine artist's skill and then just really rough clay.
This is a cool concept that Alian mentioned to Mark when he was talking to him about pottery, that 90% of pottery is function, 10% is art, but the latter is more important. So you should be spending 90% of your time working on making it functional. But the part that matters, the part that differentiates you, the part that makes you an artist is that 10% of art. And I think the way that he's using these different clays, and whether it's the darkness or the grogginess of the clay and the chunks in it, it gives it character. It takes what people know as porcelain with the pure white and the Qinghua and turns it on its head. And it's really cool to see him doing this.
Yeah, and one thing that we've really liked about him is when he starts using these darker clays, the black clay. It's so cool because, like Dart said, we're used to seeing the really clean white porcelain. And then when you see a piece that's just like really like midnight black, it's so cool. And then this piece has like some intentional moldings to it. So he throws it really well. And then you can see his fingerprints where he presses the clay in to give the body just a little more texture, a little more shape. One interesting thing about Yuechao is he's not from Jingdezhen. And this is something we see a lot in this area. A lot of people from all over China, if they're very good at ceramics, there's one place you want to go, and that's Jingdezhen. It's not the same with Yixing. We see a lot of transference between, Yixing natives going to Jingdezhen, but not a lot of people going to Yixing permanently. Maybe they'll go there to study, but they won't set up their full studio shop there. So the vibes of these cities are totally different. Where Yixing feels like it's just coasting on tradition, Jingdezhen feels like it's a lively hub of new innovation. And one thing I noticed about these pieces, Dart, maybe you can help me out here. When I first started getting into the wood-fired pottery, I noticed there would be these cracks in the glaze. And over time, the cracks would start filling up with tea. And for me, I was like, oh, it's like Ruyao. But it's certainly not Ruyao. Do you know what's going on here? This Kai Pian effect.
So it is, you're getting that similar Kai Pian effect, exactly. So we actually should probably talk about Ruyao before we kind of get back into what's happening here. The Ruyao is a soft matte glaze, typically in white, off blue or off green. That's different than what's happening here. What's happening here with the porcelain is this is typically incidental. So this is a breakdown in the structure of the clay, whereas the Ruyao, they formulated intentionally so that the whole thing has the cracks on it. Typically, in all other types of ceramics, the cracks are seen as a negative thing. But in teaware, because it fills with the color of the tea and gets a patina to it, we actually see it as an intentional good thing or a benefit for the piece to have. This is an incidental reaction that happens in the kiln for the wood-fired pieces, not super controllable. Unless you see it like completely along the side, like the whole entire side, then maybe there was a translucent glaze that was formulated intentionally to crackle like Ruyao. But typically on wood-fired stuff, it's incidental and just part of the cool process of the wood kiln.
So as you mentioned, sometimes the crackling, the breaking in the glaze, for other pieces, it's unintentional. It's seen as a sign of, a failure at some point. It would fall into the seconds of the potter's tea shelf. But here with Woodfire, a lot of this kind of goes out the window.
And it is really cool because the teaware industry is really the only area of pottery where these cracks are seen as positive pretty much across the board, whether incidental or intentional, because of this effect. But it's extra special when it comes out of a wood kiln because there's so many different textures. As Derek mentioned, the huowen, where that wood is hitting the side, that flame is hitting the side, creates one effect. Then you have the vitrified smooth effect. And then if you have a beautiful translucent crackle, like impossible to make intentionally, which is why they're so unique and so cool. Derek, is there any of Yuechao's work that he does any sort of like designs or painting on, or even works with anybody else to like do designs or painting?
Right. He's a potter, a ceramicist at heart. And his pieces already sell out almost instantly. Like every time he opens the kiln, like we have to be there and buy the pieces right away or they're sold out. And so for him, I also, when I first started working with him, I was like, oh, do you ever do wholesale custom orders? And he's just like, no, I'm just too busy to do that. Every piece you make sells out almost instantly. Like, why bother doing this kind of painting, do these collaborations, do this other stuff? So I'm sure there are some pieces that he would love to collaborate with people, but at the moment, it seems like he's just at his limit, just making as many pieces and selling them as he can.
Like you said, it's really just him and his wife, right?
Yeah, I mean, his wife does a little bit, but mostly the Yuechao pieces are just him, right? And so it's not a studio with apprentices. And this is one thing I noticed too in how it's different in Jingdezhen than a lot of other places. A lot of the studios there are singular artists who are doing every step of it. Even like these two brothers, the Liao brothers, they're not from Jingdezhen, but they came and they started throwing all their pieces, trimming all their pieces, just those two people, and they create a prolific amount of teaware. But they do the wood fire kiln in a very rough way, where they're always firing the wood fire kiln. If a piece is wonky, they'll still sell it. They don't care. And they'll charge the same price across the board for a warped cup or a clean cup. And it's just like, they're like, yeah, people like the warped feeling of it.
I think it still is just another form of uniqueness that is interesting for people. Do you know about the firing though? Like, I know throwing by themselves, that makes sense, but like running a wood kiln could be anywhere from like a 3-day to, you know, a couple week or week and a half process. So like, do you know with either the Liao brothers or Yuechao, like, are they, is it group kilns? Because that's pretty common in the US for wood kilns.
Nope, they're all still individual kilns, like studio kilns.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and so the Liao brothers, when I met one of the Liao brothers, he had a massive burn on his arm, and I was just like, "Whoa, what's going on?" And he's like, "Oh, it's from the wood fire kiln, you know," because he'll just like they'll stock it all night, just the two of them. And so I imagine, you know, late at night, one time he's getting a little sleepy, he's not very mindful as he's tossing the wood in, gets a flare up. With Yuechao, it's a little more fine-tuned. Like, he has his parents helping. He does it. His wife does it. And so they have essentially 4 people working the kilns. They're still doing smaller kilns, though their big kilns take about like 3 days to fire. So that's still just firing it consistently 3 nights in a row and stuff. And so they'll do that once a month or so.
I mean, to me, that makes sense. Like, if you're running a wood kiln by yourself, basically, even with 2 or 3 other people, like it makes sense. Like, with the quality of his work, how much he's able to output, how big the kiln is, like, that's crazy. You haven't been there for a firing yet, right?
No, not yet. I said I could go, but it's also like I can't tell him when to do the firing, right?
Right.
when he has enough teaware, he's going to do a firing, and if I'm free, then I can come and visit.
We got to make that happen. Like, that would be so cool, because I have so many questions comparing to like the American wood fire scene, because it is a very distinct, like, there's pottery or, general ceramics, then there's teaware, and then there's like wood fired, which is like kind of its separate thing that is also niche and overlaps with teaware with some people. But like, I'm very, very interested to see the 3-day fire by yourself kilns, like with you and your family. Like, that's, oh, dude, that's the dream. I'm so excited, dude. I cannot wait for you to get to Jingdezhen next week. Other than Yuechao's stuff, what are you most excited? Because we have a whole list of things we're looking for, but what are you most excited about that's new that we're trying to find this trip?
So, of course, there's that good ox-blood connection. If we can find somebody actually doing like legit ox-blood, we have a few people, but it's like they're a little inconsistent, but I think that's kind of the nature of ox-blood. I'm excited about finding that. I really want to find somebody who does hand-painted teaware and just seeing what kind of artistry we can get painted onto the gaiwans and the cups and stuff.
Yeah, there's nowhere better literally in the world. That's the one thing that impresses me in my research. Like, when I'm looking into Jingdezhen, so many styles either started in Jingdezhen, or Jingdezhen's the only place where people have recreated these ancient styles. Like, for example, the Ruyao, right? Like, you can get Ruyao everywhere now, but Jingdezhen was one of the only places that started retesting to try and recreate Ruyao when it first started and came back into fashion. So Jingdezhen is kind of the place where everyone looks to. Like, no one's looking to Yixing for all these old styles, right? Like, Yixing kind of already has its place, whereas all these things are coming back together. So the essence of Chinese art is just so much different. And I hope that we can capture that essence in these painted pieces with things that are relatable, or we have cool stories that we can connect with, our audience to, because they're so cool.
Another place I want to get out to is Sanbao. Last time I was out there, I visited Li Jackson out in the community of Sanbao. Li Jackson did a lot of work to bring back the artistry in Jingdezhen porcelain after the SOEs kind of broke down. China came out of that Maoist era and stuff like that. Because during the Maoist era, Qinghua was outlawed. Like, they were not allowed to sell Qinghua, the blue and white porcelain. And so there was a lot there was a lot of stuff to get back after that era. And I was out there last time, talked to Li Jackson, and apparently a guy from Kansas City, from the Ceramic Institute, Fine Arts Institute in Kansas City, I think his name was Lidi. He came out there in 2008, 2004, something like that, and he helped Li Jackson, they were really good friends, kind of build up that Sanbao museum and stuff. And so it was really cool to see that Yuan Fen connection, that destiny connection, where it's like, oh, I'm from Kansas City, and I'm out here in Jingdezhen And he's just like, no way.
Dude,
Like, I love Kansas City. Like,
do you think he's still at the university?
I'll have to check. I can reach out. Yeah.
Well, because also, this is a funny story, funny sidebar before Ultimatum. We were together, right? The week before Midwest Tea Fest this year
Right.
in Kansas City, right? We were in the city that, that it happens in. And it was the only time where Derek and my schedule lined up to being in the US in the same place. And we weren't able to make Midwest happen because I was traveling the week before. So we didn't make it to Midwest Tea Fest. But Derek's dad, super cool, invited me out next time. He's like, yes, next time you're here, you know, Midwest Tea Fest. So this year we're going to Midwest Tea Fest. And if I'm in Kansas City, if Lidi is still there, oh, that'd be so cool to connect with them. Just a few questions for Ultimatum today. The first one, for if you have a Tsinghua cup, would you rather like a cha bei, right? A small little, you know, porcelain cha bei, or do you want a really fancy, like blue and white painted jurenbei, that specialty bowl or cup?
I definitely go for the jurenbei on this one. Just because the Tsinghua is so intricate, I would love to just gaze at that as I'm drinking. In a small cup, I feel like it's a little too much, maybe.
I think if there's anything on it, the jurenbei for sure. Like if it's plain, I would probably prefer the little teacup, or even just like the rim like we have on the blue ribbon. But yeah, if there's any sort of art on it, like it's got to be a big one, because it's the canvas. This one will be interesting because we'll see when you go to Jingdezhen what you kind of send over to me. But classic or modern Tsinghua art?
Oh, interesting. I actually found some really cool places doing the classic style. And what's really cool about the Tsinghua is just the change in the coloration of the paint and the glaze. Where it's like I see them painting on teacups, and I'm like, what are you guys doing here? And it's like they're like, oh, we're doing Tsinghua. And I'm like, that doesn't look like Tsinghua. And so for me, it'd be really cool to get the classic like before and after shots and seeing that transition.
I admittedly do not know as much about poetry and the Chinese arts as Derek. So for me, some of those classic Chinese cups, I can appreciate them, but I don't feel a connection to them. So honestly, I'm more excited about the modern Tsinghua potential designs that we can come up with, similar to the acquired taste.
Yeah, and of course, it's so cool about Jingdezhen where you get that seed of tradition and then somebody innovating it.
Desert Island question. If you could only have one piece of porcelain and it was not wood fired, would you take a Dehua set or would you take a Jingdezhen set?
Would the Dehua be that mutton fat porcelain? Like, would it be the soft, unglazed, or slightly not vitrified?
It has to be. It has to be. Yeah. I don't want any vitrified porcelain from Dehua.
All right, then I'd go Dehua.
Yeah. Yeah, Doha is so cool, and the mutton fat, it's cool. It's cool.
I remember I asked Liu, the glaze guy, if he had any pieces that he could loose low fire for me so that they're not vitrified, and he gave me one teapot, and I love it because it actually stains with the tea that I'm brewing in it, which is so cool to see on a white canvas. You can actually see that kind of use, that patina slowly grow into it. So
that is a really cool question to leave for when we go to Dehua, because I know you can fire it lower, but a lot of times for that Dehua feeling, that soft feeling, the clay is cut. And so I'd be really curious when we get to Dehua, are they cutting the porcelain with other clay, like a white stoneware, or are majority of them lower firing them? But that's for another episode. We are so stoked about Jingdezhen. Thanks for joining us for Between the Cracks.